The status quo is very extreme, and we have different analyses of what Trump represents with regard to that status quo.
Yeah.
For me, he is the personification of the worst elements of that status quo. And so of some of the worst elements, to pick up from Eugene's opening, we've been being told by Black and brown communities for decades that there is far-right white supremacy in law enforcement. This is a message we've been told again and again and again. And, Rudy Giuliani, Black communities in New York knew who Rudy Giuliani was. A lot of us white people did not know who Rudy Giuliani was. Rudy Giuliani did not become someone else recently. It's just that, as usual, as you see in the literature on fascism from figures like Aimé Césaire, what they say is fascism is when what Black populations are subjected to, colonial populations are subjected to, gets turned on white people.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's a frame of analysis that is important. My general analysis of the situation comes from the Black radical tradition. There is a speech that affects me greatly by Toni Morrison in 1995 called Racism and Fascism. So when we ask, what do we face? It was a Howard University commencement address. And everyone cites Umberto Eco's Fascism piece because, he's a European. But Toni Morrison gives an analysis of fascism in that speech and applies it to America. She comes from America. I mean, let's not forget that in last time I did these statistics in 2014, 2015, almost 10% of the world's prison population was African American. So she talks about what she says that America has often preferred fascist solutions to its political problems. And then she describes what fascist solutions are: large prison camps, violent militarization. And to me, my reading of the situation we face is Trump is a kind of personification of those fascist forces. As a New Yorker, as somebody, I'm from Syracuse, New York, but I've spent many years in New York. My mother was a court stenographer in Manhattan on 100 Center Street in Manhattan Criminal Court during the Central Park 5 case. So I know what Donald Trump is from the Central Park 5 case. And so, and on, as many New Yorkers do. So the status quo was bad, but Donald Trump was someone who blew flame on the fire of the status quo of the 90s. So was Joe Biden, and so was Bill Clinton. The 1990s criminal justice era was one of horror, but Donald Trump was a sort of rhetorical representation of that horror. So I take him as representing these incredibly problematic forces in American history. I'm not wedded to the terminology of fascism, but I am wedded to a terminology that allows us to make predictions. And I think Sam and I have a lot of overlaps and really not as many disagreements as people think, or not that many disagreements at all.
The wrong guy.
But I mean, we have some disagreements because we've had made different empirical claims about what would happen. Because I regard Donald Trump as a personification of uniquely American forces that figures from Du Bois through Angela Davis through Toni Morrison have called fascist. I made certain predictions. I do not underestimate Donald Trump. So that was our difference. I don't about predictions. I always thought Donald Trump would not leave office peacefully. I always thought he would try to win over law enforcement. I always thought that he would do things like pardon Ryan Gallagher, the Navy SEAL officer. He's always seemed to me a clever, smart, cunning figure who leans into America and is incredibly dangerous, which is not to vindicate the status quo. It's to say that given that how horrific the status quo is, having someone who's legitimating the worst elements of the status quo, having someone who's bringing a Rudy Giuliani to the nation, is something we need to take seriously. So I have always been the coup is something that I expected. The coup is something, well, whatever we call it, the language, I think some of the language is important for political reasons, because, so for instance, I'm a philosopher of language, and and I also work on the far right. So the far right had a big celebration about the expression alt-right, which was introduced a fight about who gets credit for it between Richard Spencer and one other famous, I think the editor of Countercurrents. And it's a big propaganda win.
Julius Klein?
No, he's a philosophy PhD, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Too many members of the
not all philosophy PhDs, hashtag, yeah.
So there's a fight among the fascists about who gets credit for it, because when you call them the alt-right, that sounds like a Seattle grunge band.
Yeah.
So it's an enormous propaganda win. I think it's an enormous propaganda win that they were called populists by figures like Yasha Monk, because populists, then you can blame the left and the right. Because so the terminology is important. It's important because it places the blame correctly. And then it's important, and it doesn't whitewash in the way that alt-right does. And then it's important in that it allows us to make predictions. One of the ways I characterize fascist, I'm a philosopher, so I'm not going for this historian. We have to locate. I give a theory of fascism. And here's a sort of working characterization we can work with. A cult of the leader who promises national restoration in the face of supposed humiliation by immigrants, communists, and minorities. He presents himself as the only solution. And so on my framing, if that's the right analysis, Donald Trump was going to try to seek to take over the Republican Party, and he was not going to try to leave power. Now, I think the Republican Party is incredibly dangerous. I agree with Chomsky's assessment. It is the most dangerous organization on earth. As I've worked on Flint, Michigan, done a lot of work on the emergency manager law, and you didn't need the Russians to poison 6,000 children.
Nor did you need a Republican to drink water and say that he probably was exposed to lead as a kid. That's Barack Obama, for anyone out there who doesn't know the reference. Yeah.
Right, and the
which doesn't undermine what you're saying, but yeah,
the Democratic Party has enormous complicity. Why do we face what we face? We face what we face in large part because of the failure to prosecute the Iraq War, the failure to seek accountability for the Iraq War. We were left with ICE. I've argued in the New York Times after AOC called ICE used the concentration camp analogy. I've argued that ICE is similar to the Gestapo in various ways, should raise worries there, is a potential organization that could be used by an authoritarian leader against its political opponents. We need to get rid of ICE. We should have prosecuted the torture regime. We should have punished the people responsible for the Iraq War and the financial crisis. And all of this was not done. And the message we gave is people can do that with impunity. And I'm concerned that if we don't take seriously enough the Trump administration, we're going to have a situation where people take the wrong lessons, just as they did with the Iraq War and the financial crisis.